Good morning. This is the May 20th, 2020 meeting of the Maryland Public Service Commission. The commission will come to order. To begin with, we have meeting minutes to approve from the May 13th, 2020 administrative meeting. The vote begins with Commissioner Richard.
I vote aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell. Aye. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
And Commissioner.
Aye.
I vote aye. The meeting minutes are approved. Mr. Secretary, the consent agenda, please.
Mr. Chairman, there are 3 items on today's consent agenda. One is a notice from Washington International Insurance Company of cancellation of bond for Empire Telecommunication and Energy Consultants. Item 2 is the application of Worthington Energy Consultants, LLC for a license to supply natural gas or natural gas supply services in the state of Maryland. And item number 3 is the application of Beech Ridge Energy 2, LLC for certification of the Beech Ridge Energy 2 Wind Energy Center as a renewable energy facility.
Thank you. Do the commissioners have questions? Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman, I have questions on number 1 and number 3, and I'll start with number 1. And my question is about the process for canceling the bond. So I'm assuming the bond is already canceled. Can someone help me with how that process works, how that cancellation happens?
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioner on behalf of staff. So yes, the bond has, in this case, already been canceled. Typically, the insurance company will send us the bond cancellation 60 days before it actually cancels. And in most cases, the company will replace the bond before this one expires. In this case, that didn't happen, which is why we're recommending canceling the license.
Okay, so you said in most cases, the surety holder will notify the commission 60 days before the actual cancellation. Is there anything requiring that? Here's what I'm trying to get at, Michelle, and I appreciate the answers. If we have a bad actor, which we've recently had, and we had to exercise our right to that bond on behalf of the ratepayers, could a company cancel a bond before we had a right to exercise any recoupment of the bond?
No, I believe the insurance has to give us the 60-day notice. Or sometimes if it does get canceled before then, the notice will say canceled on this date or until it's met its requirements.
Okay. And in a case where we had a bad actor who was bonded to be a supplier in Maryland, what would staff do to stop that cancellation of that bond?
If they were bad, we try to get it before the commission, before the bond canceled. So if you wanted to act on the bond, you had the opportunity to do so.
Okay, so there are safeguards in place that a company is not going to cancel the bond before we have a chance to exercise any right we may have under that bonding.
Correct.
Okay, very good. I'm satisfied with that. And the $300 non-payment here assessment fee will go to central collection.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have on number 1. And number 3, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask where the facility is located and what the approximate value of the renewable energy credits are.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Michael Jang on behalf of staff. So this facility is located in West Virginia, and it would the approximate value of those RECs would be $950,000.
$950,000 goes to West Virginia, creates jobs there in the economy and circulates in West Virginia's economy, not necessarily Maryland's economy. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we're all cognizant of the money flowing out of our state on a regular basis due to this program. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, staff. Seeing no additional questions from commissioners, I will propose motions for these 3 items. With respect to item number 1, I propose that we cancel the energy license of Empire Telecommunications and Energy Consultants LLC. With respect to item number 2, I propose we grant the company a license to operate as a natural gas supplier in Maryland, limited to broker services for the customer classes and service territories applied for and recommended by staff, and that we direct the company to provide marketing and training materials specific to its Maryland operations to commission staff 30 days prior to utilization of the materials in Maryland, and that we direct the company to file notice with the commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in the application. Finally, with respect to item number 3, I propose that we approve the application and issue a renewable energy facility certification number, that we direct the company to establish a REC account with PGM GATS within 30 days of certification, and direct the company to file notice with the commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in the application. The vote begins with Commissioner Richard.
I vote aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
And Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved. Mr. Secretary, the administrative agenda, please.
Mr. Chairman, item number 4 on today's administrative agenda consists of revised tariff pages, Delmarva Power and Light Company, reflecting updated purchase of receivable discount rates. On this item for staff, we have David Hoppick and Annette Garofalo, and for the company, Susan DeVito and Matt Seegers.
Good morning. I'd like to start with one correction. So please turn to page 5 of staff's comments. So below table 3, the middle paragraph, in the second sentence, it reads, including annual interest revenue or expense is consistent with the Potomac Edison and BGE POR, as well as PEPCO electricity supplier coordination tariff. That should read Delmarva electricity supplier coordination tariff. All right, with that, good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. David Hoppick on behalf of staff. By letter order dated October 5th, 2009, the Commission gave the Delmarva Power and Light Company broad guidance for establishing purchase of receivables discount rates. Delmarva has filed revised POR rates effective June 1st, 2020. The proposed residential POR rate is 2.1428%, increasing from the current 2.08 to 1% rate. The proposed commercial classes POR rates remain unchanged at 0%. Delmarva is proposing to amortize 2018 and 2019 residential uncollected costs over 2 years in the reconciliation calculation. As outlined in staff's written comments, the Commission has previously approved amortizing 2016 and 2017 residential uncollected costs over 4 years in the reconciliation calculation. If the 2018 and 2019 residential uncollected costs are not amortized in the reconciliation calculation, the residential POR rate would increase to approximately 3.2%. Staff supports Delmarva's proposed amortization of 2018 and 2019 residential uncollected costs. Additionally, Delmarva is including interest revenue and expense in its reconciliation calculation. This is consistent with Delmarva's tariff, as well as the Potomac Edison and BGE filings. Staff recommends that Delmarva's revised POR rates be accepted for filing effective June 1st, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Hoppick. We'll take questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Herman, do you have questions?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure whether, Mr. Hoppick, you want to answer these questions or whether the company might want to answer some of these questions, but I'm trying to understand how far out these multiple amortizations are going. Is it, I'm looking at the company's exhibit, I think it's attachment 3, page 7 of 7, which kind of lays it out. So the first amortization I'm sorry, I'll let you get there.
So I included a table in my comments.
Mhm.
It's on page 5, table 3.
All right, just a second, let me go there. All right, I'm looking at it.
This summarizes the past amortizations and then the future amortizations. So hopefully this answers your question.
So we're amortizing through 2022, right?
That is correct,
Okay,
yes.
so does that mean that when does the original 4-year round of amortizations that we approved in 2018, when does that end?
So for the 2016 uncollected costs, the amortizations are completed with this filing. For the 2017
I see, all right.
uncollected costs, we've done one previously, we're doing one in this filing, and then there's essentially 2 more.
Got it.
And then
Okay.
for the amortizations for this filing for the 2018 and 2019 residential uncollected costs, we're doing half in this filing and then half in the next filing. So the next filing should complete everything except one portion of the 2017 amortization.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Hoppick, do you have like a threshold at which, an increase in staff's view would be appropriate? Because you say you want to avoid a more than 1% increase, but my concern with continuing to do these amortizations is that, for example, next year, we might anticipate with these moratoriums on shutoffs and everything else that the amortization, or that the amounts might be quite high next year. And so when are we, at some point, the supplier, it seems to me the supplier should pay what the actual uncollectible rate is. So how do we make sure that we get there, Mr. Hoppick?
So that is something I did consider in thinking through this. So Delmarva's filing is based on the prior calendar year. And so next year's filing will be based on 2020 calendar year data. And we know that through at least July 1st, there are going to be no disconnections in the Delmarva service territory. And then after that point, presumably if someone is going to be disconnected, there would be a notice of at least 14 days. They might previously to that, they should be given the opportunity to enter a payment plan. And then if they are disconnected, the company holds the uncollectible amounts for 180 days. And then after that 180 days, they are sent to a collection agency. And then 60 days after that, they're written off. So essentially with that timeline, and I do agree there is the potential for a future increase in the uncollected costs that eventually make it into the POR rate. That's likely to show up not in next year's filing, but the following year's filing. So with the amortization of this year's, or this filing's 2018 and 2019 uncollected costs, it spreads it out to prevent that essentially 50% increase from 2% to 3%, and hopefully solves the problem before we see a potential increase again 2 filings in the future. So that was my thought process, and it was something I had considered. The other thing I would note is in last year's POR filing, staff did suggest a reduced amortization, not last year's, excuse me, two filings ago did suggest a reduced amortization, and the commission went with Delmarva's proposal for 4-year amortizations of 2016 and 2017.
Okay. And Well, I'm just, well, I think that's all I have right now, Mr. Hoppick. I think we'll have to face this potentially again. As you said, maybe not for the 2020 uncollectibles, but maybe in 21, we might have to face this. We'll have to wait and see, but I think you're right that, you know, we do have to think about the future and whether or not we're going to insulate suppliers from actual uncollectibles. So that's something that we'll have to think about in the future. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's all I had.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hoppick, I just wanted to just see if I could better understand if you had a chance to talk to DPL, and because in a moment we're going to take up PE, and there's such a huge discrepancy between PE's discount rate, poor discount rate, and DPL's. Is it all because of the very high delinquency in the DPL service territory?
Yes, essentially. So in the 2016 filing, excuse me, the 2017 filing, which reflected 2016 uncollected costs, there was a significant jump in the uncollected costs for Delmarva. And what we learned through extensive discovery with the company was essentially they had a delayed dunning process whereby they didn't disconnect folks for quite a long period of time, and some residential customers had arrearages in the neighborhood of like $5,000. And then they finally started writing those off, and that led to a very large increase in the uncollected costs, which the commission did previously decide to amortize, to spread out. But basically the difference between Delmarva and the Potomac Edison filing is the level of uncollectible costs. That's why the residential rate is a fair amount higher than the Potomac Edison rate, which I believe is around 0.3%.
Right, and I recall that discussion in 2018 about the dunning processes of DPL. You know, I am maybe to the other side of Commissioner Herman here. I'm concerned about the hit that suppliers are going to be taking. I mean, is there any fault that should be placed on DPL for their dunning process? Did they do anything wrong? I mean, is there something that we should be at least learning from?
So in staff's 2017 comments, we did note that we didn't recommend this, but as an option, the commission could not allow them to collect all of those inflated or high uncollected costs, but the commission ultimately did decide to allow them. So, you know, I think the main reason there has been this amortization over time is to avoid a very large jump in POR rates, to keep rates in the range of 1, 2, up to 3%, such that there isn't the large jump. And I recall that from the 2017 filing, had there been no amortization, it would have jumped from something below, I think, around 1 to about 6%. And that is why we did go with an amortization, because we did not want a supplier who thinks that the amount of revenue they're getting from the company is, you know, 99+% of their receivables, and then suddenly get on the order of 94.
Okay.
So, you know, the POR residential uncollected costs are thankfully declining. So in table 2, I do provide a history, and then in the appendices, I also provide the equivalent tables for standard offer service and distribution. You can see they are a bit higher for purchase of receivables, but all three are trending in the right direction. I am concerned that a year, 2 years from now, we are going to see a jump again because of the COVID situation. But that wouldn't be an issue with
Right.
essentially
Would be
not
the Dunning
disconnect.
process, yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Okay, and I take it you've heard from the suppliers. I take note that Mr. Green didn't file anything.
Yes.
So they're, I guess, okay with this resolution for this time around?
I made sure to reach out to them via email to make sure that they were aware of the filing, and I did not receive any responses.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. I should allow the utilities to respond if they wish. No response is necessary. Mr. Seegers?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matthew Seegers appearing for Delmarva Power. As the Executive Secretary noted, also appearing with me is Ms. Susan DeVito, PHI's Director of Pricing and Regulatory Services. I have nothing to add to staff's comments or the remarks by Mr. Hoppick, but we're here if the Commissioners have any questions for the company.
Thank you, Mr. Seegers. It sounds as if the Commissioner's concerns, and they are legitimate concerns, have been addressed by Mr. Hoppick, but we'll be paying close attention as this comes around again. Unfortunately, it does appear that there'll be a higher rate of uncollectibles, at least for the 2020 period. But the fact that this amortization drags on year after year is problematic. With that, I will propose that with respect to this item, that we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of June 1st, 2020. The vote begins with Commissioner Richard.
I vote aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Clinton?
Aye.
Commissioner Herman?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The motion is approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, item number 5 on today's administrative agenda consists of revised tariff pages from the Potomac Edison Company reflecting updated purchase of receivables discount rates. On this item for staff, we have Drew McAuliffe and Annette Garofalo, and for the company, Jeffrey Trout and Ray Valdez.
Thank you. Good morning, technical staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Drew McAuliffe on behalf of staff. On May 1st, 2020, the Potomac Edison Company filed its revised POR discount rates. By letter order dated October 5th, 2009, the Commission gave Potomac Edison Company broad guidance for establishing purchase of receivables discount rates. The proposed residential POR rate is 0.3435%, increasing from the current 0.2124%. The proposed commercial classes POR rates remain unchanged at 0%. As accepted by the Commission in PE's last POR filing, PE has simplified the calculation of POR rates by consolidating the small programming reconciliation balances with the primary reconciliation balances. This consolidation has no impact on POR rates and allows full recovery of all programming costs to date. Staff recommends that the Potomac Edison's revised POR rates be accepted for filing effective June 1st, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McAuliffe. Counsel for the utility.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is Jeffrey Trout on behalf of the Potomac Edison Company. As noted, Ray Valdez, our Director of Rates and Regulatory Affairs, is also available. We agree with staff's recommendation. We have no additional comments. We're here to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Trout. Do the commissioners have any questions? Seeing none, I'll propose that we accept the tariff revisions for filing with the effective date of June 1st, 2020. The vote begins with Commissioner Richard.
I vote aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Aye.
And Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, item number 6 on today's administrative agenda is BGE's request for a mandatory waiver of CPCN requirement for a project to build a portion of an existing overhead transmission line in Harford County.
Thank you. Good morning, technical staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Roger Austin on behalf of staff. On April 15, 2020, Baltimore Gas and Electric Company filed a written request to the Commission for a mandatory waiver of the requirements to obtain a certificate of public convenience and necessity as set forth in Section 7-207B-4 of the Public Utilities article of the Annotated Code of Maryland in connection with work to rebuild a 3.9-mile portion of a 115 kV overhead line that runs between the Perryman and Hartford stations in Hartford County. The main reason given for needing to complete this work is that every structure on this line has significant corrective maintenance and aging infrastructure concerns that will impact reliability in the near future. Staff has analyzed the work that will be performed and is satisfied that it meets all the requirements of a mandatory waiver. Staff has also been assured that there is no possibility of endangering public safety through the interruption of telephone services. Additionally, no electrical outages are expected during construction, and no businesses adjacent to the work zone will be impacted by the construction. Staff therefore recommends that the Commission grant a mandatory waiver of the CPCN requirement pursuant to Public Utilities Article Section 7-207b-4 for the work described in the company's filing. Finally, as noted in staff's comments, the Power Plant Research Program filed a letter on April 29th stating that it did not oppose the waiver request. The Office of People's Counsel filed comments on May 18th, which are not particularly supportive of the CPCN waiver request, but the OPC notes that there are no grounds to oppose BGE's request.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. We'll turn to counsel for Office of People's Counsel.
Good morning. William Fields for the Office of People's Counsel. As Mr. Austin noted, we filed a letter on this. Do not oppose the granting of the waiver for this particular instance. We did raise some issues regarding the replacement of wooden poles, but we thought that was information that was valuable to the commission, although that particular issue would come up if it's raised in a rate case scenario. So for this waiver application, we don't object to it. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Counsel for the Power Plant Research Program, if you have any comments.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Steve Tolson, Assistant Attorney General on behalf of PPRP, and Jenny Rogers, the project reviewer, I believe is also online with us this morning. As Mr. Austin noted, on the 29th of April, PPRP filed a letter noting that it had opposed the project. It had reviewed the materials submitted by BGE and believes that they are in accordance with 7207B4, small Roman numeral 1. I have nothing further to say unless the commission has questions, in which case Ms. Rogers can address them.
Thank you, Mr. Tolson. Counsel for BGE.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Jessica Reba on behalf of BGE. I'm joined today by our Senior Project Manager, Tiffany Matthews-Lay, and our Principal Engineer, Robert May, on the project. As the other parties have noted, no one is opposing our request. I'm happy to address some of the issues that OPC raised in their letter in the context of this project if the commission would like me to, but being that it sounds like OPC doesn't think they're relevant to this waiver request, I'm happy to say that we're just here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rob. Commissioner O'Donnell has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is probably for Mr. May. So I noticed in one of the pictures in the filing there looked like a migratory bird nest on one of these structures. And I just through my own experience at a utility, we had to put up special poles to relocate those nests for the migratory birds. We couldn't just take them off of our structure. Is that the case here? How do you handle that migratory bird nest that I saw?
So, good morning. This is Robert May, Principal Engineer with BGE. In the particular picture that was sent, that was an osprey nest. It was positioned on the top of one of those poles. We have had several other osprey nests along the line that we have actually removed. We have done that outside of the breeding season, and through our permit work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we have not had to go back and put in a new nesting platform elsewhere. We have taken the opportunity recently to put in some nesting and perching deterrents in those locations to keep them from coming back to repeated locations. But the nest in the picture that you're referencing is still there. That particular one is not in a what we would deem to be a hazardous location, so we elected to leave it as we're proceeding through with this proposed project.
I'm surprised Fish and Wildlife let that nest down. I used to maintain Cliffs nuclear power plant, and we were required to actually put up a new. They got their own telephone pole. Anyway, I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Commissioner Richard.
Yes, I'd like just to ask for a question for the company. I am interested in some of the points made by OPC. I guess what stood out for me is the cost of this project, $23.2 million for a 3.9 mile line. Just talking to our own staff, it seems that it exceeds what the standards are for the cost per mile of transmission line. So can you just explain a little bit why it appears that this line is more expensive than a typical transmission project, and why some of the decisions were made to seem to put some significant upgrades in this project?
Sure, Commissioner, I can try. So this project, that's the total project cost that we're citing there. And there's a couple of things about the design and engineering of this project, just because of where this project is located, that I think are important. One is that we're going from 2 parallel single circuit lines to a double circuit line, which actually allows us to install half as many new structures as we would if we were to replacing these with new wood poles on a 1-for-1 basis. And there's a benefit to this project of doing it all at once, especially because this is located on the Aberdeen Proving Ground property. And for every location where we dig to install a new structure on their property, we have to do what they call an unexploded ordnance scan, which means we have to hire an outside contractor that's approved by APG to look for any potential buried hazards on the project. And the design that we're using, if we were to do a 1-for-1 replacement with wood poles, we would have to do 2 scans per structure on twice as many structures. So we think there's a real benefit to the design of this project and to being able to get this all done at once, basically. And as far as the total project cost, I would just note that that's not just construction cost, that's total cost. So it includes all of our design fees, all of our engineering fees, during design and engineering and construction through the project. So just to make sure and I'm not sure exactly what you're comparing it to, but just to make sure it's an apples to apples there.
Okay, well, thank you. And is this line part of a bigger overall transmission line that you're just kind of looking at, section by section, or is this the project for this overall transmission line?
No, this is pretty much the project for this particular line, Commissioner.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Fields, if you're still there.
I am.
Yeah, just a question for you. As you noted, this is a mandatory waiver requests, and so there isn't a lot of that we do at this stage of the process for at least at this commission on looking at some of the points that you raised in your filing. Is this something? Is there something that we ought to be doing though at this point, that should OPC or other parties want to explore this further at a rate case at FERC, that we ought to consider stating or doing, or is this pretty much all you wanted to get in the record at this point, that this issue was raised, your issues were raised?
Yes, I think we wanted to raise the issues. I don't think there's anything, we didn't have anything in particular in mind for the commission to say or do at this point. In the record and to bring it to people's attention, to take into consideration as this goes through the FERC process of ending up in transmission rates.
Very good. Well, I appreciate your the filing and the information you provided, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Seeing no additional questions, I would move that we grant a mandatory waiver of the CPCN requirement pursuant to Public Utilities Article Section 7-207B4 lowercase I for the work described in the company's filing. The vote begins with Commissioner Richard.
I vote aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
And Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 7 consists of proposed tariff revisions from Potomac Electric Power Company and Delmarva Power and Light Company to their schedule residential with plug-in vehicle and residential plug-in vehicle charging schedule, time of use, standard offer service rates. For staff, we have Drew McAuliffe and Lloyd Spivak, and for the companies, Doug McKeel, Matt Seegers, and Peter Blazunas.
Thank you. Good morning, technical staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Drew McAuliffe on behalf of staff. In order 88997 and case 9472, Delmarva Power and Light and Potomac Electric Power Company were ordered to offer a whole house time of use rate and a EV only time of use rate for standard offer service customers who own an electric vehicle. On March 31st, 2020, PEPCO and DPL filed revisions to their Schedule RPIV, a whole house time of use rate, and Schedule PIV, an EV only time of use rate. PEPCO currently offers both the RPIV and PIV rates. This filing is updating these rates, and for Schedule PIV, PEPCO is reopening the schedule, which has been closed since October 31st, 2015, to new customers with qualified EV chargers, EV smart chargers, excuse me. DPL is revising the Schedule RPIV rates, which were updated and accepted by the Commission on January 22nd, 2020. DPL's filing also includes new tariff pages and rates for Schedule PIV, which is a new schedule for DPL. On May 7th, 2020, PEPCO and DPL filed further revisions to the RPIV and PIV rates to incorporate the most recent residential SOS rates. All RPIV rates are increasing, except for the summer on-peak rate for Delmarva customers. The PEPCO PIV rates are decreasing during the on-peak periods and increasing during the off-peak periods. DPL has no customers currently on either the RPIV or PIV schedule. PEPCO currently has 314 RPIV customers and 89 PIV customers. Staff proposes that the Commission accept the updated PEPCO and DPL tariff pages as revised for filing with an effective date of June 1st, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Counsel for the Utilities.
This is Doug McKeel on behalf of Power. I don't have anything to add. Mr. Blazunas and Mr. Bonikowski are here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McKeel. Mr. Bonikowski, welcome back to the PSC. Do the commissioners have questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Richard.
Yeah, can I just, probably this would be for Mr. McAuliffe. I just like to understand the models a little bit. I was a little surprised to see that the PIV off-peak rates are less than the whole house rates. Why would that be? Why wouldn't they be the same rate for both tariffs?
So the way PEPCO and Delmarva do the calculations, they take into account, first of all, the usage patterns of the different rate schedules. So for the RPIV and the PIV, customers have different charging patterns, how often they charge on peak versus off peak. They also have different load obligations. The calculations took into account PJM load obligations and things of that nature as well. So there's a few different variables that would cause that. It's not a direct apples to apples rate calculation, like I said. So, for example, in my write-up, 1 second. Let's see. On page, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find where I put the usage patterns. Second, there it is. So on page 2 of my write-up in the footnotes, you'll see that in July and January, there's even a different, for the PIV, there's an off-peak and on-peak different usage patterns. So as you'll see in July, for example, for the PIV for PEPCO, 73% of the time, the customers charge on-peak versus off-peak, while in January, they charge 70% of the time on-peak versus off-peak. So there's also differences in just the months and then between the rate classes RPIV and PIV. So just the way the calculations work out, it would produce different rates.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate hearing more about the granularity of how these models work, because that kind of confused me. And I guess it probably is the same answer, but I'm kind of surprised to see that we have a situation where on-peak drops and off-peak increases. Obviously, this is supposed to be an incentive that we're trying to get people to sign up for. But is it pretty much the same answer? It's just this model that...
Yes, and also the PIV rates have not been updated for quite some time for PEPCO. I think that's another factor to consider there. And yes, it's essentially the same answer, but yes. So the charging patterns between on and off peak could have changed. The load obligations between those times could have changed as well. So yes, it's pretty much the same answer. But again, those rates I believe haven't been updated since 2015. PEPCO can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCullough, for explaining that to me, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any additional questions? Seeing none, I will move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing as revised by staff in its comments dated May 11, 2020, and direct the company to file clean copies of the tariff revisions with an effective date of June 1st, 2020. The vote begins with Commissioner Richard.
I vote aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
And Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved. I believe that's the last item of our administrative meeting today. Just a programming note, tomorrow we will initiate a public rulemaking session in docket RM 69 with respect to public participation in CPCN proceedings. That will start tomorrow right here at 10 a.m. With no additional business before the commission, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.